Hello everyone and welcome to this course. In this course, we'll be learning how to build single-page applications using Angular with TypeScript. But before we get started, let me first introduce myself. My name is Professor Richard Crasso, and I'm the Program Director and Assistant Professor for Bellevue University's Web Development Program. I've been teaching at Bellevue University full and part-time for several years. Before teaching, I held positions as a programmer analyst, software engineer, senior software engineer, and application architect. I am also the CEO and founder of a tech startup company here in Omaha, Nebraska. Before we begin writing our first line of code, we should probably discuss what Angular is and why you would want to use Angular to build a client-side application. So first things first, Angular is a framework versus a static or a standard JavaScript library. Some examples of libraries would be jQuery or React. Why is Angular considered a framework? It's because Angular essentially comes with all the bells and whistles that you would typically need to build a client-side application. Now, notice I've been talking about client-side applications because, to be clear, Angular is a tool that we would use to write code that is rendered in the client. Meaning when a user visits your application, they're going to typically access that application through a web browser. Well, the web browser will pull up and will run your client-side code, and that's what we're using Angular for. So the next question I'm often asked is, what is the difference between server-side rendering and client-side rendering? In server-side rendering, you would use a web framework to render the actual pages that you want the users to be able to have access to. So in other words, when I click on a button in a website, if I'm using server-side rendering, I would use that framework to render that HTML page along with whatever server-side code that I want to display. In client-side rendering, when a user visits your application, their browser will download all of the JavaScript in code for your client-side application. Now, you can still have interactions with the server through HTTP GET, POST, and PUT request, but essentially the code that you're writing in your application is going to be rendered in the client side. So what are single-page applications? Single-page applications are essentially applications that have been designed so that all the code that you write is embedded into a single HTML page. Now, if you remember from the example I provided for server-side rendering, basically when you create an application using server-side rendering, each HTML page is being served up from the server. Well, in client-side rendering, as I explained, is everything is being rendered as a single package that's being displayed in the user's browser. So single-page applications is essentially just that. It's a methodology that allows us to write HTML code or templates and JavaScript code that can be embedded dynamically into a single page. Now, there are many advantages to this because now what we can do is we can essentially take our application and break it into smaller components so that we can tell through JavaScript code what parts of our application or what sections of an application that we want to display to the user based on some kind of interaction from them. The last component in this is going to be TypeScript. TypeScript is the language that we will be using to build our websites using Angular. TypeScript is a transpiled language that basically takes TypeScript code and transpiles it into native JavaScript code. There are many advantages to using TypeScript, and hopefully throughout this course you'll learn those advantages and you'll come to appreciate the nuances and the sugar, if you will, that TypeScript adds to the applications that we build.